And we have 11,892 miles on Lexmoto Venom SK125-22 made by Sankey. And I'm just gonna go for the upgrade, which is I can see all these wires being exposed on my motorcycle on the side, which is obviously in the meantime it means it's exposed to all the elements as well, like rain, wind, and obviously that just increases the possibility for the wire corrosion and everything else like rust. So first, how I'm gonna try to solve this issue is just test that everything is working on my motorcycle as it should. So to do that, obviously I'm gonna turn my instrument panel on, check that everything is working nicely, quickly check my indicators, that's working. Other indicator working. Check my lights, so that one is working, the long beam is working. And well, I could check as well that my ignition key is working. It does. So everything is working as fine. So to do that now, I just gonna switch off my instrument panel, which is obviously gonna cut the power, just to make sure as well that there is no electricity flowing through. I press the emergency cut off button, and now I'm gonna get right in there and see what's actually happening. Crosshead screwdriver to access this panel, you have to undo a little screws on the side. So let's undo one of them. So that's one of them from one side. Let's quickly undo another one. That's another one from the other side. I'll store these screws nice and safely. Let's open this panel. So doing that, I'm just holding these little plastic bits to move these wires out of the way. Okay, and now we have access to the whole wiring. In my opinion, it's quite bad design because we have a really nice opening, large space here to duck all the wires underneath of the instrument panel, and all these wires kind of seems like they're just pushing the headlight down and bending all these wires, obviously creating a rubber erosion here by pressure, and at the same time even the indicator wire is really bent, which seems like it could even break. So I think the way these wires are put in is either in manufacturing error, or very simply someone just not being as neat as they could possibly be. So let's investigate further. There is really not that much play for me to do anything with it, and even at the same time I noticed that the way how the housing is rubbing against the frame is actually rubbing off a frame number, as funny as it sounds on the plate. So clearly something is not installed as supposed to be, or as best as it could be. First, I think I'm gonna investigate this particular space that I'm noticing it, that would all this bulk really nicely would fit inside there and probably would be protected from the elements quite nicely. I see that if the wire would be longer, it would fit actually really nicely. So let's see, maybe I could extend this wire somehow. And by looking the way the wire goes from the side, I probably definitely can, because the wire seems like going from the side of the frame, underneath of the front fork, and then goes up. So if I pull that wire from the fork side and let it sort of feed itself through the side, I will get more extension. To do that idea of the improving wiring, it would involve disconnecting everything and connect it back together. Now you would think you don't want to touch it. I'm not blaming you, because probably I would not like to do the same thing either, but in the long term I believe if I leave it like this, the exposure to the elements will ruin the wiring, and then later on I will end up most likely buying the whole loom, wiring loom, to replace it. So let's see what I could do. I'm just snapping the picture of where everything is meant to go, so in case I forget about it, I could at least recall where potentially everything meant to be. The other way to do it would be to mark it like in numbers 1 to 2, and obviously that way is clearer as well. So now I got myself a marker. I can mark it down to make myself clear where everything's going, so I just keep on going. So this is going to be my 1 with 1, 2 with 2, that's the major connections, and the red one underneath. Let's see how I could now disconnect them and connect them back, and hopefully everything will be working just as it meant to. Okay, so that's my speedometer. I'll put that to the side. What else we got? Now this number 2 is a headlight. So my headlight is connected. And what else we got here? So here, the other big beefy one is the power supply for ignition, which I haven't marked it down yet. So now when I have access to it, I will mark it. And that's my last wire to disconnect. There you go. Now I have indicators free from the loom as well. So everything is disconnected. Let's move on to the next task to try to remove all this in different path. Okay, all my wires are disconnected right now, and I'm gonna try to move them out of where they are, and let's see how successful I could be with this. So as I currently see, if I try to squeeze everything through this tiny gap, well, due to the size of it, most likely will not happen. So probably would be the best thing to try to unscrew these bolts so I can take everything nice and gently. Let's go for it. So I move about a tiny bit more and get my spanner in there and try to undo one of these nuts. They're really tight. So it's a 13mm spanner, by the way. Hey, we got a bit loose. Good. Okay, loosen up one. Let's try to loosen up another one. That's a great news that I'm able to move that, because at the end of the day it could be seized and all sorts like what I had before with the mirror. So that's great news that it's moving. Take the bolt out to get as much space as I can behind there. There you go. And now I can move this wiring out of where it was before, underneath of the fork, and if I move my motorcycle steering, I think the best way would be to feed it through the side. And now when I got this wire out of the way, I could put back, everything is the same like it was before. Now when the bolts are tight and back where they was in the first place, I try to feed the wire loom through the side of my fork. That should give me a tiny more extra wire length to deal with afterwards. So if I move my front lights, my speedo front, my indicators to the side, headlight out of the way, you can see there is a lot of space. Quite clearly all this space will be taken over all this wiring loom. Just look at that, how much extra length I have with this wire right now by just being fed differently. So before I forget anything, let's reconnect everything back the way it was, which is obviously is the biggest challenge. Okay, so this is connected. That is connected. There you go, that's the last one. So that's the ignition. Alright, so now when I've done my last wire connection, everything is connected back. I will test it or it works. So to test it or my connections are correct, I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna twist my key. Instrument panel lights up as supposed to be. I'm gonna try my indicators. It works. I'm gonna try my other indicator. It works just fine. Same with the back. And let's have a look about. A light is on. Headlight is on. I switch on emergency key and starts as well. Brilliant. So it seems like everything works as it's supposed to be, and because it works as it's supposed to be, I could turn it off and have a peace of mind that I connected everything correctly. So now when I know that I connected everything correctly, I will try to tighten this mess up. So let's have a look. We have all these wires meant to be bunching up quite nicely into one sort of bulb. And I try to put this rubber bit over them as much as it goes. Okay, so I can see that this little rubber is go as much as it can over all my connections. And now I want to just test my idea of trying to fit all of this wiring mesh above my headlamp. Let's have a look. So if I pull this wire a tiny bit, wrap it around the headlamp, just have a look at this. Fits so nicely and neatly there that you would not even think a second thought that is not supposed to be there. So I took down the wires. The last thing to do is to attach these little bulbs. So as you can really tell, all the wires are fit in nicely in there and gets covered from the elements. The main wire loom goes from the side here, and instead of going underneath of the fork and wrapping itself back up, I just put it through the side of a fork and squeeze it all above my head lamp there. So as you see now, the wires are out of the elements at the same time as it is out of the view of the thieves that would might think about something rewiring your motorcycle to start it. So the last bit always left for me to do is to tighten up these little bolts back into place and get that installed and secured properly. So I'm just gonna push this one into place, bolt it back up. Yep. I'm just bolting it back up. But anyway, there you go. Now when the both side bolts are in, you could really see the difference. All the instrument panel is covering the access to the rain, as well as this front light covering all my wiring essentially away from the rain. Even if it is kind of designed for this wire to land down inside of this housing, I just left it to be. You can see how much of my number panel was rubbed off, and essentially now when this wire just on the side, I think is just fine as it is covered from the elements for putting all the wires away. So the only problem that I believe that I could encounter over the long period of time is simply because every single time I'm moving my motorcycle handlebars, the wire is actually moving as well, and that's obviously would be increasing the possibility of wire snapping. But from the other side, what I believe is simply Sankey cut down the manufacturing cost and hasn't made the wire long enough to be ducked down out there nice and gently out of the weather conditions. And due to this, obviously then all the wires are exposed to the elements, and once they're exposed to the elements, most likely within a couple years, those elements would make that wire break anyway, and obviously make you to buy another motorcycle. So this way I'm protecting my wires from the elements, but obviously increasing the danger for that wire wearing off from the constant move of my motorcycle. Well, you can't win everything, but generally speaking, it would be really nice if Sankey would make this wire a bit longer, so it would feed the way how it was fed before, but then as well obviously it would be ducked out from the elements. Currently this is the way how I'm dealing with the element issue to protect the wires. And as you see, everything just looks nice and neat. You can't see any of wires sticking out for the elements like it was before. So let's see how many miles I will manage to cover. So far is 11,892 miles, and I think it will last me longer than anybody might would think.